All right, that looks good. Welcome, everybody. This is Charlie from RedBlueTalk. My channel is all about how politics and government impact people's lives. And, I'm trying to reboot this show. I'm trying to do a few more interviews than I've done in the past, and at least a couple every week. And I want to jump right into the details. My guest tonight is Kim Snyder. How you doing, Kim?
I'm good. How are you?
So Kim, the reason I asked you in particular to come onto this show, you've got a kind of a role here in Westchester. I think of you as like the census lady. Okay, you've got. Tell me about your specific role. I know you were assigned to a county committee by County Executive George Latimer. Talk about that committee, what they do, what your role is, and then we'll get into the gory details. What is the census?
Okay, so, what is the census? The census is the decennial count of residents, not citizens, but residents for the purpose of apportionment. It's been going on since 1790. So it has a long history and a loaded history. So this is 2020, and it's time for the 2020 decennial census.
So let me skip in. Why do we, in 2020, do we still need something that was created in 1790?
Well, that's a good question. And in a lot of ways, it's the same, but in some ways, the census count is different. It's no longer, but there are also more people. Mm-hmm. So you need new tools. But for example, this year, the census went online for the first time ever. Okay, so that was a new aspect of the 2020 census. And people did not know how that was going to go. People were very concerned just because there's a lot in the news, not trusting the internet, et cetera. How much could they rely on online census?
But Kim, basics. We need a census because...
Oh, okay. We need that basics. Okay.
Yeah.
So don't dive in the deep end yet. Okay.
Easy. You're answering like you're going directly into like the college graduate level answers, and I'm trying to get my arms around sixth grade.
Okay. And a lot of people, and I dare say myself included, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, okay, I might not have been a savvy census lady, right, at all. And the census is used to apportion federal funding. Okay, that's one of the bottom lines. So lots and lots of federal dollars that fund our communities. How many dollars New York State gets is based on the number of residents that are counted in the census.
So it's a way to get to government dollars.
It's funding.
Okay, it's funding.
Government dollars, that's a biggie. The other biggie is that it's about congressional representation.
Okay.
So where are congressional, the number of congressional representatives, right? So I'm in Congressional District 16. Elliot Engel is currently our representative.
For a little while?
Yes. How many representatives we have as a state, right, is determined by the number of people in the census count. So we are likely, and this was one of the reasons that I was personally really concerned about the census, is really basically the more people you have, the more influence, right? More people to bring home dollars, more people to sit on various committees. And New York State stands a risk of losing 2 seats on a good day.
Okay.
Pre-COVID.
So if you have an accurate count, it helps you because...
Well, the thing is, what we're trying to avoid is a big undercount. Okay?
Right.
So you want like the complete count, and this idea of, and you'll see that on some of the signs, like the complete count committee, that's aspirational, right? We want the complete count. But for example, there are parts of New Rochelle where only 47% of the people who live there, who are estimated to live there, have completed the census. And these estimates are based on 2010 census, another census that they is audio. Okay, another census that they do in the interim, the American Community Survey, which is a longer one. So, and God knows what statistics. All right.
Okay.
So currently, New Rochelle. Okay, so this is an important fact about the census, and I have this on a map, but you're just gonna hear me say it.
Sure.
Okay, so right now, nationally, all right, the United States as a whole, 63.9% of the people who are estimated to live here in the United States as a country have completed the census, have been counted. And you can go see this online. You just Google census response rate, and you
Hit
can.
me,
It's
hit
pretty
me,
cool.
hit me with that number again for me, please.
So, in the country as a whole, 63.9% of the residents who are estimated to live here
Okay.
have completed the census.
Is that
Yeah,
good, high, low, or in the middle?
I'd say that's probably low-ish.
It's on the low side. Okay. And
Yeah,
how
we
much
could
time?
look that up.
And how much time is left?
Okay, so here's the catch. It was, well, pre-COVID, okay, what happens is you have the census self-response. So that's where people fill out a form or they go online now. So that's the new thing. They go online and they complete the census. And if they haven't, then people go door to door. The enumerators is what they're called. And they knock and that's what we often think about. And probably back in 1790, that was the entire census, right? So the enumerators were supposed to start knocking doors in May, and then and they would have 3 full months of door knocking, and then the census would wrap up in at the end of July. That was the original timeline. But along comes February, and in fact, New Rochelle, the hot spot for a while, right? A pandemic, right? We were all ready to go out with census pods at the library, help people, because a lot of people don't have internet access. A lot of people aren't comfortable putting that information in online.
Yeah, I must tell you, I personally wondered about it. I did it, and I'm a little confused because I think I responded to two different surveys. I think there was a community household survey. Maybe you can
It was
explain
really
the
long.
difference.
Yeah.
Super long, and I did it, but then I seemed to get another survey weeks or months later, and I responded to that, and I think that second one was the big census. Does that sound right to you?
Yes. So, in fact, that's confused a few people. Someone reached out to me about that this weekend, right? So, there is the census, which is like 10 questions. That's the one that everyone's supposed to fill out, right? The decennial census. There is also another survey that the census people put out called the American Community Survey. And that's a much longer census. And I dare say it's pretty friggin' invasive of
Yes,
people,
yes,
right? It
and that
asks
was
you
the
lots
first
of
one I
questions.
received.
And so people are like, whoa, I don't, so, but that's a survey that on an ongoing basis is sent out, this longer one. And it's used for different kinds of planning. I mean, it goes into a lot more detail, but if you're using census data is used for all kinds of things like community planning, how many schools to build, how many hospitals, et cetera, stores, commerce, things like that. So you kind of need that deeper dive data, but you don't need it on everyone. So not everyone, I have never gotten on the community survey, but someone recently reached out to me last weekend and said, my friend got this survey and it's really long and they're saying they have to like fill it out. And it's like, is it the census or is it not? And so I checked with the census office and I didn't think they would do both at the same time because that's kind of, that's a lot of stuff.
Kim, it happened to me. It happened to me. I got
Yeah.
the American Community Survey, and I thought that was the census, so I participated in it. But then it turned out that that was not the main census. I got both of them were available online. I responded to both online. They send you I guess you call it a unique identifying key, so that they don't get two responses from the same household, I suppose. And then you just respond. You can respond to the whole thing on your computer or your phone.
Yeah, no, so it's the online part. I mean, imagine how much that helps with their gathering of data, right? That basically gathers their data for them, right? So, but see, to me, and I think about, I work at the intersection of technology and people in my professional life. And so I often think about how people think about systems and how people use them. And how confusing is that, right? You get it. I mean, and I would dare say that there are probably people who didn't complete their regular census because they thought, hey, I already did that. It was a longer one. So that was surprising to me that they would do both of them at the same time. Just because where's the education around that? Like
Right.
that you even filled it out, and it's like, so what's the deal here? And that they don't give you a lot of education, and there isn't education around why bother doing the census in the first place. And so that's a lot of what my volunteer work over the last better part of a year has been around educating both myself, other people such as myself. A lot of my friends
Right.
were like, what, really? All that funding? It's the amount that, and this is a conservative amount because it tends to bounce around a little, but I think, I'm not inflating numbers by saying, so for each person, and that means like a family with like mom, dad, 3 kids, that's 5 people. Okay. Even a newborn baby, infant, $2,750, so $2,750 per year in federal funding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now that sounds, right. When you add that number up, so I looked at New Rochelle's estimated low response number,
Yep.
right? Like what they had estimated based on our last 2010. What are, and they call them hard to count tracts, where they tend to be more transitional, more apartments, more people moving, and so the hard to count tracts in New Rochelle, I added them up. And if they performed on par, and we got like, and some of them were like, I think it averaged around 26% of people not responding. Okay, so you're looking at 74% of people responding. And that was the low response. We're looking at right there, just those people in those hard to count tracts, and there were maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 of them, 26,702 dollars or $703 per year, and for the next 10 years. And that's just a few hard to count tracts in New Rochelle.
Sure.
So that's $267 million of funding that New York State, I mean, like, so when the exponential,
right, it grows tremendously. And so, and what is that, the undercount and the resultant underfunding result in, Kim? It means what? Less infrastructure, less free and reduced price lunches, less construction of schools, less funding in the form of state aid to police departments, aid for fire. It's all of that municipal government stuff, right?
Yeah, roads, basic, fixing streets, bridges, hospitals, building new hospitals, adding equipment or capacity to existing ones.
Right. Million little things that you'd never really may not think about. Right.
Early childhood nutrition, things that are pretty elderly programs, right? Community elderly programs. Some of those are funded by federal dollars.
So then talk to me about, you're defining this as sort of a human rights challenge. It's a civil rights threat, potentially, undercounting. What are the politics around it? I mean, I know that you've done some work with the local Indivisible group on disseminating information. What are the local politics around the census? Well,
the politics are, and this time around, it's been particularly politically charged. Initially, there was a lot of stuff in the news about there being a citizenship question, which there never was, right? That never got added. It was the courts struck it down.
Right. So let's just be clear. There was a lot of noise about it being added. The noise itself may have deterred some people from responding.
Absolutely.
But the question never actually made it in because the court said no.
Yeah. So but there was so much in the news. It was very, very noisy story. Is there going to be a citizenship question? And further, that was coming up at around the time that there were also ICE raids happening. So does that mean if there's a citizenship question, are people at risk, right? And you think about people, most people, myself, right? 10 years ago, I did not think about why I was completing the census. So you could have said funding. I would have been like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. But if you so if you don't realize what the value of filling out your census is, and you're being asked to give up information, and put it into an online system, by the way, and oh yeah, there's a lot of Russia online in the news too, while we're at it. I mean, this is just noise, right? And there's a lot of noise about a citizenship question, and simultaneous to that, there is also ICE raids happening in the city where you live. I don't know, but would you, even if you were a documented citizen, like if you'd come from somewhere else, my mother is an immigrant. She came here from China, right? So you are going, it's going to again, we're always at risk of an undercount of the census. So that's going to exacerbate an existing situation where the whole community pays, really. It's not, so that's partly how it got politicized. And then it got politicized again very recently in the news. You may be aware that there was a whole, people who are non-citizens won't really get counted. Okay, so that was in the news a couple weeks ago, very recently. And so, again, it rises to the top, it gets in light. So then people think, well, why bother? If I'm not going to get counted anyway, why should I bother? And, it's a count of residents. It's been since 1790, although it's gone off its track a few times on the way, in not good ways. A count of residents living at a given point in time in his place.
Right.
That's all it is.
Kim, it's my sense that the government, for all of the things we may think that the government could do better, that the government has a lot of very smart people working within its organization. Don't they have the ability to sort of, based on decades of data, don't they have the ability to sort of interpolate and say, we know that there are certain census tracts that have historically been undercounted, and make an adjustment? I mean, does it come out in the wash, or is the threat real that you're undercounted and your neighborhood will suffer as a result?
An undercount is an undercount. I mean, it is both advanced and kind of not. Right? So it is a literal count of people. So if there are people that don't get counted, that's federal dollars, that's less representation. You would think, I mean, so the question is, all right, so if the whole country is undercounted, and I played this thought exercise in my head.
Scenario,
right? If the whole country is undercounted, well then, right, but even if the whole country is undercounting at 63.9% today, right now. I looked it up before I called. New York State is at 59.7%. So we're 4.2% below the national average.
Right.
Okay, so that's kind of
still a gap. So there's still a gap.
Yeah. And some neighborhoods in some parts of New Rochelle, some of our hard to count tracts, have as low as 47%. Right. So can we bump up these numbers? I had started to say that before COVID, right, this was all happily going along on a timeline, everything all nice. It was going to be, people knocking doors. And that's usually how they then bring up some of the numbers.
Is that still happening?
In a much less functional capacity. And it started in August. I think it started this month or maybe late July, but it's not at the same velocity. One of the things we did was sponsor some job fairs, because the thinking is the more people you have locally from your town or municipality doing the census, the more trust there's going to be in it.
So Kim, put a frame around who's we in that sentence. Is we that Westchester County sponsored organization? Is it we the county itself?
It's we, our community, right?
Okay,
It's a
got it.
community-based thing, and that was a real eye-opener for me to help me understand. Remember, I had not been involved at this level. I'd filled out a census. It was as far as I'd gotten in 2010. So what struck me, because each community is different, each community has its nuance, right? So we had complete count committees, like New Rochelle has a complete count committee.
Yeah.
Mount Vernon has one. White Plains, right? So each of these towns has one. So that was the first big push on the Westchester Complete Count Committee, was to make sure that all these municipalities had one. Portchester was like way ahead. Like they had their Complete Count Committee before anyone else, right? There was sort of the model citizen.
Do the numbers reflect that? They've had more success as a result?
They've had some success, but they've also had, I think, some areas that were very hard to count tracts. So, but they're tracking it closely, and I don't know their numbers off the top of my head, but they, in terms of involving the community, so lots of different community members. Now, this was non-political because it's really just to get a count for funding. So it was people from the community were part of the Complete Count Committee.
Yeah, Kim, it would seem to me, if you're a mayor or you're a state legislator, you want the census numbers to be up there, right? You have every reason to go out and tell your constituents, pull it together, respond to the survey, respond to the person if they show up at your house, and kind of get the story out there that there's nothing but upside for filling out the census, right? I mean, can we say that? It's a fair statement.
Yes, and a lot of elected officials did, and you'll hear George Latimer does robocalls and whatnot for the census, and they promote it. They have it in bus stops. So that was the part of the Complete Count Committee that I helped with, was around the communications, around kind of how do we promote this, et cetera. And the county put a lot of resource into it, and making sure each community had their Complete Count Committee.
So Kim, let's use the few remaining minutes we have to debunk myths about the census. I'll bet, and I don't want to open Pandora's box on the broader topic of disinformation, which I know is something you know a lot about, but it's a different topic and a bigger topic. A couple of myths about the census.
Well, okay, so a myth about the census. So the best disinformation or misinformation, and it's all around intent, okay? Disinformation is with malintent. Misinformation is a mistake, right? But often the most effective disinformation is based on a kernel of truth. So I'd say the biggest misinformation has been around whether or not people who are not citizens actually count. Okay. Whether that stems back to the citizenship question, which was at the time threatening and scary. So
let's say it one more time. There is no citizenship question on the census. There is none.
Residents.
Right, so myth number one, debunked.
Yeah. And residents. If I had someone from England who was living at my house and at the time of the census was here and planning to be here as a resident, like in my house, that person would count, right? And then we had books, we had wonderful books that got published on who counts. Because it's like, if you had a college kid, and this was confusing to a lot of people. So if you're a family here and your kid was in college, again, COVID really wreaked havoc with this one. And your kid was in college in, say, Massachusetts, well, actually, your kid would count toward Massachusetts, not toward New Rochelle.
Okay.
So it's who's living where and the official day was like April 1st. But,
so I got another myth bust for you. Okay. If I fill out the census, will my taxes go up?
Oh gosh, no. It has nothing to do with your taxes.
Okay.
No. You won't even have to serve jury duty.
If I fill out the census, am I going to start getting marketing phone calls on my phone number?
No. Okay, so census data, and this is one of the, I work in data for my job, right? And because it was going online, this was a big deal, right? Because then there's this feeling of it's more available. And no, there are very strict laws governing what can happen with data. And, one can question, well, does law and order mean anything? That's a whole other Pandora's box. I'm not going to go there. But legally, census workers, okay, are bound by, pretty strict parameters, very strict legal parameters about data and divulging data. And census tracts, this is interesting piece of trivia, census tracts are sized in such a way that you can anonymize the data enough, right?
Okay. So can you explain what that is? I know what it is, but not everybody understands that terminology.
So anonymized data means when this data gets reported on, any identifying information of people, like your name or any potentially identifying information, is not associated with that data. So it's used for things like race, ethnicity, gender, age, numbers of people, but all of that data can be kind of seen in aggregate. So all rolled up as totals based on tract, city, county, things like that. So that's anonymized data.
So anonymized data might say that there are, they might reveal that there are 3 people living in the house, but not their names or any personally identifiable information.
And further to that, though, I believe the size of the census tracts are such that you couldn't even, if you threw some crazy algorithm in there, you can't deduce people.
Who it is.
You can't identify people.
Right.
And so there's a whole code of ethics around data, privacy, and confidentiality of the name information.
Yeah. So how much of this really comes down to how much people trust the government and fundamentally how much they believe in the anonymity of their information that they're providing. I'm going to share a personal story. In 2010, when the census came along, I didn't fill it out. I got at the time, I don't remember it being an online option, but it was a paper document. I didn't fill it out. No malice. I just didn't bother. And then one day I'm on my porch and a guy comes along and he says he's from the census and he wants me to answer all the questions that were in the paper document. And I was like, dude, I'm busy. Get lost. I'm not interested in doing this. And my kids were playing on the front porch. My wife was on the front porch. I said, look, all the information you need is right here. Take it down and get lost. And that was my feeling about the census at the time. I didn't have confidence that the information was anonymous and all those things. I just didn't think about it that much, Kim. I'm being perfectly square with you. But the guy was able to collect what he needed, the bare minimum. How many people live here? I assume he was able to identify race and gender and all that. So enough, get off my porch. You have what you need. 10 years later, I had read some things that led me to believe that it was something I did not need to be afraid of, that I could fill the information online, although I will say there was a couple of questions on the community survey that I felt they don't need to know how much gas is in my tank and how many cars I own and all that.
Yeah, no,
garbage.
that's pretty detailed.
But on the short form census, which is the one we're talking about, there is certainly every reason in the world to respond, and I understood it much better, and I guess I somewhere came across some of the information that groups like yours have been busy sharing, and I responded. So that's my personal census story.
Yeah, no, and a lot of people, you probably didn't realize all the funding implications and things like that when you were sitting on your porch and thinking about, what's happening with my kids running around, who's this guy, right? So a lot of it is around education and helping people understand that and online is loaded right now, okay? We're in a time of big data, right? And lots of data flying out there. And so you hear all these stories, Facebook, and what data are they scraping? And so people don't want to give it up online.
But Kim, I know you have a background. I know you have a background in that area. And I do too, maybe from a different angle. We'll have to compare notes at some point. But it would seem like the same technology that makes it so much easier to collect the data also makes it harder to collect the data because people are less trustful of it.
Exactly.
So how do you reconcile those two? Because you know, if you extend this conversation out further, and we would need a whole nother half an hour, online could solve a lot of these voting problems that we're having. Nobody wants to talk about it. You and I know it's fact that there are, you know, systematically we could deal with a lot of the issues around voting and voter registration electronically, but we don't. But even just if you isolate the topic of the census, why doesn't online make it better?
Well, online makes it better, or online makes the reporting, right? So you can type in Google, anyone listening, Google census response rate, and you can look up your town and see how it's doing. You can look up by tract. That's pretty cool, and that's because a lot of it's going in online. It's like real time. That's amazing, right? If you think about the count of the entire United States. So, but at the same time, there's not a lot of trust of technology, and probably for very good reasons. That people don't realize that the census, since its inception, has always had these privacy laws around it, right? And the census employees, and we met some of them, take it very, 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 very seriously, and you don't even, joke around about it, right? And because that's kind of their oath that they take. And
Right.
this is part of collecting this data.
They're held to a very high standard.
Yes.
I understand.
So,
So listen, sorry.
But I'll say here, let me say one more thing about how
Please.
you kind of reconcile. And that's why these community kind of based and community driven census outreach efforts were so important, because trust is an issue, right? And so if Big Brother is saying, fill out this thing online and tell us this information, you're like, huh, why should I do that? But if someone that you trust, a neighbor, a teacher at a school that your kid goes to, a pastor, if someone that you trust says, the census is really important for our community, and you know what, it's okay. Whether you want to fill it, you can also fill it out on the phone. You can call it in. So there is an option. So they take it by phone, some people get the written form, some people get the door knock.
Or online.
Or online. So,
which could be mobile or web.
Yep, on your phone, you can do the census. So, part of the issue is the deadline, though, has been cut short.
So let's wrap up with deadlines. How much time is left, and what do you recommend if somebody happens to stumble into this video and they have not yet filled out the census? What should they do, Kim?
Okay, so if you haven't, so if you run into this video, September 30th is the deadline. Like, they will stop collecting data. Like, you can't fill out your census anymore. So that's in 40-something days, 44 days or something like that.
September 30, 2020.
Yeah. Okay. So you can just Google census. I think it's mycensus2020.com, right? So I'm going to look it up right here because I don't want to give out any
You can
information.
actually, Kim, you can actually share. I think you can share your screen. I think there's a button on your Restream page that'll let you share your screen.
Oh, okay. Let me just. So it's funny. I have the URL. So if you just Google, if you just type census,
right?
I don't think it's letting me share. Or is it?
So
okay.
There's a
here.
button.
All right. So here you go. So you should see a different screen.
I see it, and
okay.
I'm going.
So if you just type in census 2020.
Okay, your screen is on the screen right now. The world is seeing what you're seeing. You hit respond.
All right. The first thing that'll happen, and if you're filling it out now, chances are you don't have the code that they mailed you.
Right.
Like back in February or whenever. You can pass this, right?
Okay.
So the first thing it asks you for is a 12-digit census ID. Maybe you keep your mail. I don't, from like February or whenever it was. You can just bypass that and click, I don't have my census ID. Then you start to fill it out. I live in the US, next. And then you fill out your street address. as an identifier for doing the census. It
Okay.
will take you no longer than 10 minutes. And
Nice.
then if you're watching this and you haven't filled out your census, you better be sure that other people haven't either. Okay, I've had people, I have friends who haven't completed it yet, right? Because they think, oh yeah, the deadline's not for a while, I don't have to worry about it. Not true. I would do it as soon as possible because September 30th will be here before we know it. It's also available online in a number of different languages.
Yep.
And so, filling it out online is by far the fastest. There also are phone numbers that you can call.
Go ahead. Your screen is still on the screen.
Right. And
Nice.
so you have the option. So I just Googled census and phone.
Right.
So here you can, I think they have it, you can call in your census
Sure.
as well.
Sure.
Okay, and you can call it in a number of different languages. So that's the other way you can do your census, right?
Well, that's great,
Don't
Kim.
wait for the guy to come by your door, because they may not, because there are far, far fewer of them. And that's part of the problem.
That's great, Kim. Thank you for showing us that. Let me get back. Here we go. Okay, we're back to normal. Cool. Well, that was very interesting. Very helpful. September 30th, 2020 is the last day to have your census data collected. You heard from Kim Snyder, who's a Westchester census-oriented person. You made sense of the census. Thank you for being my guest. I sincerely appreciate that. And that's it. That's going to be it. So thanks, Kim. Folks, this is Red Blue Talk. My channel is all about how politics and government impact people's lives. You know what to do if you're watching this. Click share, click like. Kim, hang on. I want to talk to you afterward for a minute. And I'm trying to spend a little bit more time on Instagram these days. So Instagram.com/RedBlueTalk, @RedBlueTalk. I'm going to have more guests coming up Mondays at 3 o'clock. I'm on WVOX 1460 AM. That's going to be it for me tonight. Thanks, everybody, and good night.